earthquakes, and this gospel of the kingdom shall be preached in all the world, and then shall the end come.
Israel's long-awaited elections occurred yesterday, March the 2nd. Of course, everybody's wondering, will the elections work this time? There have been 2 failed elections within the last few months. So here we are again. What happened? These are the Israeli election results in real time, with 97% of regular votes counted. Now, the absentee ballots from the IDF soldiers, prisoners, diplomats, and other emissaries will be counted on Tuesday night, so we don't have those yet. Special ballots of these quarantined due to possible exposure to the coronavirus. I feel like Joe Biden here. To the coronavirus, who voted in special polling stations will be counted in a tent outside the Knesset on Wednesday morning. The remaining 3% of polling stations are undergoing extra procedures to verify their accuracy, and their results will only be available on Sunday. Legally, the final results do not need to be published until next week. What we want to do today is to present to you the picture of where we are right now. Now, according to preliminary results from the regular polling stations to date, the parties would receive the following number of seats, pending vote-sharing agreements and the Bader-Ofer surplus vote allocation system. The right religious bloc has 59 seats. Now, that's Benjamin Netanyahu's partners, together with his own Likud party. The center-left bloc has 39 seats. The joint list, that's the Arab parties, has 15 seats. Israel Beitenu has 7 seats. So when you look at the whole thing together, Netanyahu is 2 seats away from having the 61 he needs in order to install a government. So here we are as Netanyahu is looking for 2 more seats so that he can finally put together a government. Now, it's very possible that he can find 2 seats out there, and we're going to explore with you the possibility of these 2 seats soon. However, beyond that, there's another development. The 2 Benjamins are inching toward national unity. I'm talking about Benjamin Netanyahu and also Benny Gantz, the 2 leaders of the 2 large parties. According to this story from Haaretz newspaper today, Netanyahu is considering trying to put together a government with Benny Gantz. And we're going to talk about the reasons why and the implications for the implementation of the Trump peace plan. Now, all this is so critical because if the Trump peace plan is instituted in full, it appears to meet the prophecy of the Bible, the peace plan that will signal the beginning of the final 7 years to the Battle of Armageddon and the physical return of Jesus Christ to this earth. Now, that's what's really so critical in all of these things. Do you realize that the election that Israel just experienced yesterday could be prophetic in all of its aspects? So Netanyahu needs 2 seats at least to form a government. Now, he will try to get 2 lawmakers from the opposition to defect to him. But according to this article, the chances of that happening are slim. His preferred partner now is Benny Gantz. They worked together relatively harmoniously when Gantz was the Army's chief of staff. Of course, at that time, Netanyahu was the prime minister. Netanyahu certainly never wants to work with Avigdor Lieberman in his government ever again. If the exit polls reflect the actual results, this may be the two Benjamins' only way to finally end the political deadlock in Israel and guarantee both of their political survival, at least for now. Now, as we continue on, I'm going to show you all the possibilities of how a government could be put together within the next few days or weeks, and how that will lead us into President Trump's peace plan called the deal of the century. As soon as you say end time, they say, whoa, the end of the world. When's it going to be? And you can see this mask of fear. I'm not telling you the end time is coming. I'm telling you, you live in it right now. Daniel chapter number 7, verse number 4. The first beast was like a lion. We have the eagle used continually to depict the United States of America. You see it on governmental We are at the generation for which these that you will not miss one segment of understanding end time, because I've had many people tell me it's changed their life forever. Many of the major prophecies of the Bible are given to us 2, 3, some of them as high as 4 or 5 times. There is not any chance it's not going to happen, because it's in your Bible, it's prophesied, and the prophecies always coming back. Transportation Minister Smotrich says that Netanyahu wants to set up demilitarized Palestinian state. Transportation Minister predicts Netanyahu will leave out the Jewish home, the National Union, and bring Gantz into the coalition. Now let's pause a moment to understand the implication of all of this. All during the campaign, the recent election campaign, it was assumed that Netanyahu wanted to create a right coalition so that he could establish a right-wing government. However, according to Smoltz, that's not really what he's driving for. He believes that Netanyahu wants a coalition with Gantz and his party so that they can leave out the religious factions, so that they can implement President Trump's plan for a Palestinian state in the area of Judea. Now, the religious will never stand for a Palestinian state to be in Judea, because that means Israel will have to give away, by means of a signed deal, the area of Judea to the Palestinians. The religious factions do not believe God will ever tolerate them doing that. That's the reason that Smoltz is saying that Netanyahu wants to have a coalition with Gantz and leave out the religious factions altogether. Now, there is a historic opportunity today to determine the permanent boundaries of the state of Israel within the realization of the Trump peace plan. And only if it is in government the plan will be realized and not just sovereignty. In other words, Israel's getting ready to get sovereignty over the Jordan Valley and the settlements. But they'll only get sovereignty, but not a peace deal. Netanyahu really wants to implement the Trump plan on both the Israeli side and the Palestinian side and establish a demilitarized Palestinian state. For that, he needs Gantz and not the religious factions. That's the reason Smoltz is saying this is where he is really going. Now, we're talking about high-stakes political poker here. The article goes on to say there is certainly concern that Netanyahu will want to enter into the history books at the end of his term as someone who brought a historic political agreement and implemented the Bar Ilan vision. Now, the Bar Ilan vision was when Prime Minister Netanyahu back in 2009 made a speech at Bar Ilan University stating that there would be a two-state solution. Now, the religious factions in Israel say there's never going to be a two-state solution. God told us not to make any agreements, no treaties with the inhabitants of the land, that this was to be a Jewish state. So now Smoltz is going all the way back 10 years ago, picking up that speech from Prime Minister Netanyahu and calling it the Bar Ilan vision. The article goes on to say, therefore, the likely scenario is that Gantz disassociates himself from Lapid and Ya'alan, now that's the other part of his political faction, and becomes a defense minister in the Netanyahu government with his 15 MKs. With those 15 plus what Netanyahu can put together, they could put together a government. Now, if in fact Gantz gets the defense ministry, that's the second most important position in Israel, since Israel values defense above everything else. So under prime minister is the defense minister. Since Gantz went backward in this election and Netanyahu went forward, and since the conservative side scored many more votes and seats in the Knesset than Gantz's coalition, this is his one way that he can survive politically to fight another day. Otherwise, he may be out of politics altogether. That's the reason that Smoltz thinks that this is the way to go forward. If you remember, Gantz and Netanyahu went to Washington, D.C. to meet with President Trump the day before and the day of the unveiling of his deal of the century. Gantz met with him on the 27th of January, and then Netanyahu met with him on the 28th, when the whole peace deal was made public to the entire world. So both of them agreed that they are for the terms of President Trump's peace deal. So it will be easy for them now to create a grand coalition, which Trump urged them to do, so that they could implement this historic and unprecedented peace plan. Now, that's where Smoltz thinks everything is going. However, there's a possibility that that won't work out. So if that doesn't work out, Netanyahu needs two people to defect from the liberal wing of Israeli politics over to be a participant. Two people that won seats in the elections yesterday, that they could come over and make up the 61 votes that Netanyahu needs to put together a government. So let's meet the potential defectors. Netanyahu once on the right. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and his associates immediately after the elections began seeking defectors when exit polls indicated he was 1 or 2 seats away from obtaining a right-wing blocking majority, his spokesman said on Tuesday. Dr. Asaf Shapiro, director of the political reform program at the Israeli Democracy Institute, said defectors would face significant sanctions. They would be unable to serve as ministers or deputy ministers in the current Knesset, run in the next election with a party represented in the current Knesset, establish a new faction, or join in an existing one. If an independent party decides to split from a joint list after an election, it would not face any sanctions. So let's look at 4 individuals that are possibly people who would defect over and allow Netanyahu to put a government together. Now remember, we've already had 3 elections now in the last 11 months. Israel is tired of political campaigns, as are the politicians. So there is a person by the name of Orly Abacasis. She would not face any sanctions if she defected. Her dream job is to be health minister. And according to all reports, she would make a terrific health minister. So no sanctions. She wants to be health minister. And the Netanyahu government would be willing to offer her that position. That's a very strong possibility. Another one is Omer Yankelevich. She believes blue and white leader Benny Gantz is a dumb loser, unfit to be prime minister. Now, she was recorded making this kind of a statement. And now it's known, so they're saying, hey, your political future is pretty much dead over in the blue and white party that's overseen by Benny Gantz. Therefore, come on over and we will give you a good position in our coalition. And again, that would be one of the 2 needed to bring Prime Minister Netanyahu up. Now, don't forget, though, the numbers are not finalized. For example, all of the votes of the soldiers are not yet in, and the soldiers tend to vote right-wing. So we don't really know what the finals are going to be, but it looks like Netanyahu's going to be a couple of people short. Now, the next person that could possibly defect is an individual by the name of Orly Crewman. She has right-wing views and caused an uproar on Tuesday when she called on blue and white to negotiate entering a Netanyahu-led government. So here we are, the day of the election, when she heard the totals coming out of the exit polls, then she openly called for Gantz to enter in a Netanyahu government. Well, that didn't sit very well with her fellow politicians on the blue and white side. So she's considered another person that could very easily become a part of Netanyahu's government. And then finally, there's Amir Peretz. Perhaps returning to the defense ministry could be enough to woo Peretz, who has served as a minister in a Netanyahu-led government before. So look at this. We have several people here. One is already right-wing. Another one does not agree that her leader, Gantz, is even capable of becoming the prime minister. Another person has served with Netanyahu before. These are all possibilities that could help Prime Minister Netanyahu put a government together. Okay, so where are we headed, ladies and gentlemen? Frankly, we don't know yet. Now, it looks like to me that there has to be a government formed this time. It could be if Gantz and Netanyahu are not able to come to an agreement, and if none of the others are willing to defect in order to bring the Netanyahu total up to 61, then the only other choice is to go to new elections 3 or 4 months from now. Nobody wants that, but who knows what is going to happen. Now, don't forget, though, we've got President Trump's peace plan. Now, this is the prophetic part of all of this. This peace plan meets all of the criteria of the prophecy in the Bible. The Bible prophesies a peace plan, a peace agreement between Palestinians and Israelis, and that when this agreement is concluded, that we will enter the final 7 years to the Battle of Armageddon and the second coming of Jesus Christ back to this earth. Now think about that. This is a prophecy with a specific timeline attached to it. When this happens, mark your calendars, 7 years. So what we're discussing here today actually is the finger on the trigger of this peace deal that can mark the final 7 years to the glorious second coming of Jesus Christ to the earth. Now, that's not all it marks, of course. During that 7-year period, many momentous events are going to occur. Once the peace agreement happens, then the Palestinians are going to get their own state. But beyond that, Israel is going to be allowed to build its temple on the Temple Mount. The Temple Mount will be placed under a sharing arrangement. So it's going to trigger many things. Then shortly thereafter, once the temple is completed, animal sacrifices will be resumed, and that's going to create a lot of opposition from the animal rights activists. Consequently, the Antichrist, he will now appear on the world scene, cause the sacrifice and oblation to be stopped. We're not going to do these barbaric sacrifices anymore. Furthermore, you don't need them because the Bible says the Antichrist will stand on the Temple Mount claiming to be Messiah, claiming to be God. That's the event called the abomination of desolation. And that's the event that triggers the final 3.5 years known in Scripture as the Great Tribulation. So this final 7 years is going to be absolutely jam-packed with all kinds of amazing developments. Now, all of this depends on Israel getting the government together and then implementing the peace agreement that's been put together by President Trump. That's where we are now. Once the Antichrist is revealed at the time of the abomination of desolation, the Bible also says 2 preachers will appear and begin to preach for the next 3.5 years, all during the reign of the Antichrist. These 2 preachers, they're called the 2 witnesses in Scripture. You can read all about it in Revelation chapter 11, starting with verse number 3. They're going to be here, and they're going to start advocating for great revival, true revival, while the Antichrist and his religious partner, the false prophet, will be leading people into deeper and deeper apostasy. These 2 preachers, they'll be true Christian preachers. Now, most of Christianity, both Catholic and Protestant, will follow the false prophet into an alliance with the Antichrist. But not everyone will fall for it. People like you and me that understand the prophecies of the Bible, we know all about the false prophet. We understand as these things are happening, we're going to be watching it. We'll be talking about it right here on the air every single day. So it's going to be very important for us to know all of these things. And then as the 2 witnesses are preaching for 3.5 years, at the end of that time will be the Battle of Armageddon. And when Armageddon takes place, that will ultimately, in a very short time, trigger the return of Jesus Christ to this earth. So we're watching with bated breath the formation of this government. It may be a few weeks, it might be a couple of months before it happens. In the meantime, the committee has been put together to draw the final borders accurately. They're mapping everything out with the precision of a surveying officer. They're putting it all together. And as soon as Israel gets its government, both Gantz and Netanyahu agree that Israel should go ahead and implement her part of the Trump plan. That means the borders of Israel, the final borders of Israel will be set, not to be moved again. This is a quantum shift in where we are in our world right now, and that's the reason it is so absolutely critical for us to know how all this is going to fall. Now, in the next few weeks, I'm going to come back to you, and when everything is finalized, I'll be able to speak with absolute certainty. These are all the things that are hanging right now, but when I come back, I'm going to be able to say, okay, here's the government, it has been formed, and this is what's going to happen. These are all the implications. That's where we are right now. Isn't it amazing that we have such accurate prophecies of the Bible? Jesus said, I tell you these things before they come to pass, so that when they do come to pass, you might believe. You are going to see a peace agreement. Once the peace agreement happens, you're going to see the moving of Israel's borders. After that, you will soon see, and we got to see exactly how the timetable will fall and when the 7 years begins. But once the 7 years begins, you're going to quickly see the building of Israel's temple on the Temple Mount. And all these things are going to fall into place.